All right, guys, we're going to get started. Good morning and welcome to Grand Rounds. We appreciate you all being here during the holiday season. My name is Alvin Matthew, and I'm one of the internal medicine chief residents. It is my honor to introduce our esteemed speaker today, Dr. Stamatheos Laurakis. Dr. Laurakis joined the Zena and Michael A. Weiner Cardiovascular Institute in 2018 in the rank of Professor of Medicine in Cardiology and Diagnostic, Molecular, and Interventional Radiology. He is currently the Director of the Cardiovascular Imaging Program and Imaging for Structural and Valve Interventions for the Mount Sinai Health System, and Director of the Imaging for Structural and Valve Interventions Fellowship Program. He is a recognized multimodality cardiac imager and a national and international expert in imaging for structural and valve interventions. Dr. Laurakis, in collaboration with the NIH, has guided the first in humans transcatheter mitral valve replacement after transcatheter electrosurgical laceration of Alfieri stitch, the first in humans intentional percutaneous laceration of the anterior mitral valve to prevent outflow obstruction during transcatheter mitral valve replacement, and the first in humans single and double bioprosthetic aortic scallop intentional laceration to prevent iatrogenic coronary artery obstruction during TAVR. Dr. Laurakis received his MD degree from the Medical School of Athens in Greece. He continued on doing clinical research in nuclear cardiology at Mount Sinai Hospital. Subsequently, he did his internal medicine training in the Presbyterian Medical Center of Philadelphia, and then completed a year of fellowship in critical care in Brown University. He went to complete his cardiology fellowship at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas, and then did 1 year of echocardiography fellowship at Emory University. He then stayed on as faculty at Emory, where he was professor of medicine, radiology and imaging sciences, director of imaging for the structural and valve interventions, the medical director for nuclear cardiology and cardiac MRI, and the fellowship program director for the Advanced Cardiovascular Imaging Fellowship. He also established the fellowship for imaging for structural and valve interventions there. Dr. Laurakis is a level 3 trained and certified in all the cardiovascular imaging modalities. He is a regularly invited guest lecturer in multiple national and international conferences. He has been the PI and co-PI in multiple structural and valve trials and has more than 300 publications. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Laurakis.
Good morning. Thank you, Alvin, for the kind introduction. Too long, actually. But thank you for coming. Dr. Thomas, thank you for the great invitation. It's really an honor to be here and have the opportunity to present. And I know most of you are not cardiologists, but I know that interns, residents that most likely have interest in cardiology, and I hope this lecture makes them more eager to become a cardiologist. But I think what I will present is one of the latest and most advancements in medicine, I will say, and especially in the field of cardiology, because what I will show you is these techniques now are possible because of imaging, and you will see what the possibilities are, and I think more things will be coming in the near future. When I was a fellow, the developments at that time was the stents, the coronary stents. Now I think this is the most advancements in the field of cardiology, structural and valve interventions. So I have nothing to disclose. So basically my objectives are to make you appreciate the advancements of cardiac imaging, to appreciate the advancements in percutaneous structural and valve interventions due to cardiac imaging. I will show a lot of movies, and I hope they play. I want to make it, I will start from basics because because the field is a little bit maybe too advanced, but I will try to make it as easy as possible to understand what I would like to convey to you. I will start with the transcatheter aortic valve replacement, which I think is the technique that is used now very widely, and also not only for the high risk or intermediate risk patients, but also on the low risk patients who have severe aortic stenosis. And just to show from the basics again, this is the aortic valve. This is a normal aortic valve here, as you can see, wide opening. This is, again, another view of the aortic valve. This is a trileaflet aortic valve, and all the trials with aortic stenosis that are done today, and there are many, they are focused on the tricuspid aortic stenosis. So this is a normal aortic valve, as you can see, wide open, and 3 leaflets. This is a transesophageal echo, better resolution of imaging. Again, a normal aortic valve, opens nicely, no stenosis. And this, again, another transesophageal echo, where you can see the long axis, two different views. On the right, you can appreciate the tricuspid trileaflet aortic valve. This is how a stenotic aortic valve looks. You can appreciate that the valve is calcified, doesn't open. So this is how severe aortic stenosis looks like. This is what I showed you before, another view where you see the 3 leaflets. You see the leaflets are calcified, not opening well, with commissural thickening and calcification. So this is how severe aortic stenosis looks. And again, this is a transesophageal echo, better imaging. Again, you can appreciate that the leaflets are very thickened, very calcified, and don't open. And this is a short axis view, what we call, of the stenotic aortic valve, and you can appreciate that the leaflets don't open at all. And you can see it here again, because of the stenosis, when you put colored Doppler, you have a turbulent flow. The flow is not laminar as it is when you don't have stenosis. So I will start with the imaging for transcatheter aortic valve replacement. And as I was telling Alvin, we are about this year 500 cases. This week, we have done 500 TAVIs in Mount Sinai Hospital. There are 2 platforms that are used today for TAVI. This is the balloon expanding valve, and I will tell you, this is how the valve looks like before it's deployed. This is the aortic root here, and this is now, the techniques are very advanced. When we started this, maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was difficult to position the valve, but now, as you can see, there are markers that guide the interventional cardiologist where to put the valve. And this is how the valve looks, and because it's balloon expandable, there's a balloon in the valve that you have to balloon to expand the prosthesis, and this is how the valve looks after it's deployed. And this all without to have to open the chest of the patient. This is a different profile of valve, the self-expanding valve. And basically, these 2 are the valves that are used in the US 99% of the cases. As you can see, this is a longer profile valve. Again, this is the aortic root here on the fluoroscopy. And this is self-expanding because as you release it, the valve opens by itself. You don't have to have a balloon to balloon it as in the previous case. And this is how the valve looks after it's deployed. So 2 systems and many trials done using these 2 valves for both high risk, intermediate risk, and now low risk of patients, as I'll show you what the guidelines say. And as for everything, there is sizes, and the size of the root, everybody is different, is very important. And the techniques, the imaging techniques are very important because when the surgeon puts a surgical aortic valve, opens the chest, opens the aortic root, and he can inspect and see where are the coronaries, what's the size of the root in order to decide what valve to put. Here, though, we don't have that possibility. Here, we have to use imaging to try to measure and predict what is the annulus, what is the root, what would be the size of the valve, where the coronaries are in order to prevent occlusion of the coronaries. So imaging is very critical for these procedures, and we are lucky that imaging has advanced enough in order for us to be able to do these procedures safely. And as I told you, the most important is to tell what is the valve, what size of valve you will use. This is very important. And this is a very important cartoon for people in this field. And basically, the size of the valve that you use depends on the size of the annulus. The annulus is this green line here, that circle that you see. And actually, in the beginning, when we started doing these procedures, we thought that the annulus is round structure. But with the advancements, and now the CT is the gold standard for, in order to plan the TAVI, we learned that actually the annulus is not a circular structure, but is elliptical, as you can see here, which has a maximal and a minimal diameter. And this is very important to know because, as you saw, the valves are very circular. So we try to put a circular valve in an ellipsoid structure, so that can cause problems. That's why measuring the annulus is critical for the success of this procedure, and I will tell you more why as the talk is moving forward. And again, CT has become the gold standard for performing the TAVI, for do all the measurements for the annulus and deciding what valve you use. As you can see, this is a CT that we use for measurements for every patient. And today, also, in some patients who cannot have CT, with the advancements of echo and 3D echocardiography, we can do the annulus measurements also using transesophageal echo 3D. So the advancements of these technologies has made it possible for us to be able to do these measurements and do these procedures safely. The other thing that you will see in this cartoon are the coronary arteries. These are the ostia of the coronary arteries. And you can imagine, as I told you, the surgeon is able to go in and inspect all this and see where to put the valve in order the valve to be in perfect position to not cause obstruction of the coronaries and etc. However, here we don't have that luxury, so we have to use imaging to predict and know exactly where to put the valve, because you can imagine that if you put the valve too high and you obstruct the coronary arteries, that would be a very disaster for the patient, and so you don't want that to happen. And again, by using CT, today we can measure the length of the coronary, in this particular case, the left coronary, and here the right coronary artery from the annulus. So you know exactly where to put the valve, and try to put the valve too high that will put you at risk to occlude the coronary arteries. And again, because of advancement in imaging and 3D, sometimes you cannot do CT for like renal patients who have who are chronic renal failure, high creatinine. So in these cases, we can use the 3D echocardiography to do these measurements of the coronary arteries from the aortic annulus. Also, morphology of the valve. As I told you, most of the trials, actually all the trials today, they have done on aortic stenosis, severe aortic stenosis of a tricuspid aortic valve. So this is a trileaflet stenotic aortic valve. This is a bicuspid aortic valve. There are some randomized trials today that are done, but we don't have the results yet about the use of TAVI for patients with bicuspid aortic valve. And this here is quadricuspid aortic valve. No trials for this. This is very rare cases. Also, calcium is very important because, as you can imagine, if you try to put a valve in this patient, you have the calcium that will come opposing the wall of the aorta, and this calcium can break the aorta and actually can cause rupture of the aorta. So investigating the calcium, which actually is enemy of TAVI, I will say, a lot of calcium is enemy of TAVI, especially if it's in particular locations. It's very important to know where it is in order to prevent complications. Again, heavy calcium is a problem, and not only for not successful procedure, but also a risk for stroke. As you can imagine, if you balloon this valve and put another valve, a TAVI in there, breaking up this calcium can move upwards in the brain and cause stroke. So it's very important to know all this before you do the procedure. And of course, CT, has better spatial resolution, so it's easier to see the calcium and know exactly where it is. Again, this heavy calcium, that's where the aortic valve is. This is a very hostile aortic route for TAVI, and this patient, if he's not a high surgical risk, patients should undergo a surgery instead of TAVI because you can have complications. Also, with a CT, you can see the arteries because, as you can imagine, we go from the transfemoral. That's the easiest approach today, and is done more than 95% of cases are done through the transfemoral approach. And you want to know the size of the vessels because, as you can imagine, these catheters are pretty large catheters. So the size of the vessels should be measured to know if the catheter can go up and don't have a complication, a vascular complication for these patients. Another important imaging is to guide the position of the valve. As you can see here, this is a transesophageal echo. This is how the valve looks with imaging. So you try to put this valve on the aortic position here, and if it's coaxial or no coaxial is very important for the success of the procedure. And this is how the valve looks. And after you have experience and you see a lot of valves, you can differentiate the valve from the catheter, and also you can use 3D to make this easier. And this is how deployment of the valve looks. And as you can imagine, this is happening. This is a balloon expandable valve deployment. And as you can see on the EKG, during the deployment, always you have a pacemaker, and you pace the patient. You have to pace the patient at a heart rate about 180 in order to make the heart immobile, because you don't want this, when you inflate the valve to move and embolize. So that's why, especially the balloon expandable valve procedure is done under rapid pacing. You want the heart to become almost still before you balloon, and to make sure that there is no embolization of the valve. Another important thing that we do every day with imaging is to detect complications. You don't want to see this, the valve in the ventricle, and actually this is one of the early cases in my previous job in Emory, and this, as you can see, was a transapical approach. You can see the catheter from the apex. This was one of the options when we start doing TAVIs, and this procedure, the apical approach, is abandoned today because it was having a lot of problems. So you don't want to see this complication. One of the important complications that we worry all the time is paravalvular leak. As you can imagine, as I told you, the surgeon is able to suture the valve in real life during surgery. Here, as I told you, we have to predict where to put the valve. And as you can see, all these patients are elderly patients with a lot of calcium. So many times, especially if you have a lot of calcium, it's very difficult for the valve to oppose completely to the wall of the aorta. So there may be some packets that are not covered with the stent of the valve. So in those positions, you may have paravalvular leak. And we know today from many studies that paravalvular leak is bad. Actually, in this study, even mild paravalvular leak was pretty bad for the prognosis of the patient. That's why today we pay a lot of attention after the valve is deployed to see if you have significant paravalvular leak. And if that's the case, we try to fix it right there. And we do that with putting another balloon and try to balloon the valve and try to expand the valve to see if we can cover those packets and make the paravalvular leak go away or get as minimal as possible. This is some other techniques we use. As you can see here, cardiac MRI. Because these leaks are eccentric, sometimes it's difficult to evaluate the severity by echo, and we can use MRI and phase contrast imaging, which tell us exactly what is the volume of the paravalvular leak, and we can tell if it's significant or not, and if we have to fix it. This, of course, if the paravalvular leaks comes after the valve is deployed and the patient goes home. But usually, during the procedure, if we see it, we try to fix it right in there. But sometimes the valves recoil, so you can have a perfect procedure, but after a month, you may have some PVL coming back. This is how the valve looks. This is the balloon expandable valve. And as you can see, the good news is that the technologies today have improved tremendously. You can see a lot of skirts. So the valves today that we have a lot of skirts around them. And the purpose of the skirt is to try to obstruct those packets that may be not covered well with the stent of the valve and prevent the paravalvular leak from happening. So the good news is that this now doesn't happen with this advanced generation of valves, doesn't happen too often. Another complication is the thrombosis. As you can see here, the valve, this balloon expandable valve, that you can see some thickening on the leaflets. And this is one of the complications that we can see, thrombosed TAVI-R. And of course, CT is the gold standard even for this evaluation, and the name is HALT. Maybe some of you who rotate through cardiology can hear that. You have seen this on rounds, but this is the gold standard for defining thrombosis of the TAVI valve. Many trials, as I told you, and I don't want to spend too much time, but as you can see, there is no doubt that these are the valves that are used now on high risk and intermediate risk, but also many trials on low risk patients. And you can see for all-cause death and cardiovascular death, TAVI is much better than surgery. And also the durability. Another thing that we care about, because we put these valves now on low-risk patients and actually on younger patients. The important thing is to see how long, if these valves are durable, if they're durable as the surgical valves. And about 5 years study here shows that they are equal. And the field has progressed so much that actually today, on patient who has a bioprosthetic valve, if that valve degenerates and gets stenosed, we can put a valve in valve. That's what we call basically to put a new valve, one of the TAVI valves, in the degenerated aortic bioprosthesis. But also, as you know, and all the valves, surgical or even the TAVI valves, they degenerate. This is a patient with degenerated TAVI that also we can go in and put another TAVI in TAVI. And there is a lot of, if you follow this field, there's a lot of questions today what to do first. Because if you have a young patient, what do you do first? You do a TAVI or a surgical valve, and then in the future you put a TAVI in the surgical valve. So there's a lot of discussions what is the right approach on these patients, and of course every patient is different. So most likely we'll have more of these findings in the future. And this is a TAVI in TAVI. You can see perfect valve in valve. So a few things about the guidelines. What valve to put depends on the age of the patient and on the expectancy of life. And if the expectancy of life is good for the patient, as you can see here, for less than 65-year-old by the American guidelines, the patient should have surgery. This number, the 65 for the European guidelines, is 75. If the patient is between 65 to 80, then as you can see, class 1 indication to do either. And of course, if the patient is more than 80, TAVI is the preferable way to treat the patient. So again, as I told you, a lot of discussion about this and more most likely will come in the future. And this took about 34 years since the original idea from a guy, Dr. Cribière from France in 1988, who performed the first TAVI, but this was through transeptal approach. This now is through the femoral artery and the aorta. So it took 34 years for the idea to develop, and now more than 75,000 cases are done in the US. As I told you, in Mount Sinai Hospital, this week we'll reach, for this year, 500 TAVIs. And I think it's incredible. And one of the biggest discoveries, as I told you, this is how we start. Severe aortic stenosis, balloon, this balloon expandable valve here, as you can see, with rapid pacing, and you end up with wide open aortic valve, perfect aortic valve, without to have to open the chest. So I think this is an important discovery, and I think you can appreciate this. And also the reason for this is the advancements in imaging, of course, in the interventional techniques as well, and of course, advancements in the valve development. Before I move to the mitral valve, also other important things that we have developed is the 3D echocardiography, where you can measure the volumes and the ejection fraction, measured, not estimated. And another important, that is important for the field of structural, is strain imaging, as you can see, of the left ventricle and right ventricle, which this gives you more information about the myocardium, gives you an idea about the fibers, is more than the ejection fraction. Because as you can see here, the ejection fraction may look normal, but the strain may be abnormal, and that's because the strain goes into the myocardial fiber. As you can see, this patient with amyloid, you can tell that the ejection fraction is normal. As you can see, the ventricle is very contractile. However, the strain is 9, very low. Normal strain is 20. So very important advancements that takes, the imaging takes things into the myocardial fiber. Moving on to the mitral valve replacement and therapies. Again, echocardiography is very important for diagnosing and planning. CMR is the gold standard, as you know, for function, and CT, very important also for planning. And as you can appreciate, the aortic valve is completely different than the mitral valve. Aortic valve is a circular or maybe elliptical tube. And so you can go in and put another valve easily. And that's why TAVI has progressed. Took 30 years, but progressed in a perfect level. Mitral valve, though, as I will show you, is very different. It's a very complex structure, as you can see here, with the papillary muscles, the leaflets, the chordae, tendinae. So it's a complex structure, and despite, as you can see, all these many devices have been tried, and I have been participated in many of these devices with imaging, but still there is not a perfect valve deployment. I will show you what we use here in Mount Sinai. The one that is used most today is the MatraClip, and I will show you about that. But look at this, where imaging has played tremendous impact, is the mitral valve. Look at this 3D image. This is actually what the surgeon sees when opens the chest. On the top is the aortic valve, and this is the anterior part of the mitral apparatus. This is the anterior leaflet. You can see with high definition the 3 scallops of the anterior mitral leaflet and the 3 scallops of the posterior mitral leaflet. And you can appreciate on the right with color the significant mitral regurgitation. Again, this is what we call it a surgeon's view, 3D live zoom image of the mitral valve that you see basically in front of your eyes without opening the chest, what the surgeon is seeing when he opens the chest of the patient. The issue, which is not a big issue, is that, as you can imagine, we have to reach the left side from the right. So this is the atrial septum. Here is the right atrium. This is the left atrium. So you come from the right heart, the right atrium, and then you have to cross with a transeptal puncture the septum in order to go to the left and come to the mitral valve. That's how these procedures are done. And they have done a lot of procedures from the apex that goes to the mitral valve, but this causes a lot of insult to the ventricle, as was the transapical TAVI. So I think the future for mitral valve replacement is to do it through this approach from the transeptal approach. And I will show you what we do here in Mount Sinai. The technique that is used today is the clip, MatraClip. And actually, again, this week we have been done 100 clips here in Mount Sinai. And I will show you a few images of how to do this, how this is done. This is, again, a mitral valve. As you can appreciate, this is the anterior leaflet. This is the posterior leaflet. And as you can see, the posterior leaflet goes up into the atrium. It's a FLEL posterior leaflet. And this is mitral regurgitation, as you can see here, severe mitral regurgitation. Look at this. This is a 3D zoom image of this mitral valve, where you can see, as I told you, this is the aorta on the top, the anterior mitral leaflet, posterior mitral leaflet. This is a P1 scallop, P2, and you can see these things flying. It tells you that the leaflet, this scallop, the P2 scallop, which is the most frequent one, is FLEL. So you know exactly where to go. And that's what the surgeon sees when he opens the chest. That's what we see when we do the transesophageal echo. And you know exactly where the pathology is, and you make a plan how to tackle this pathology and treat the severe mitral regurgitation. So this is a patient with a secondary mitral regurgitation. The previous one was primary. This is a secondary. As you know, a lot of patients today have heart failure. As you can see here, the ejection fraction is not so good. So this patient has secondary mitral regurgitation because of bad ventricle. Another advancement, the people who have participated with us, and I will tell you, if you have an elective to come and see these procedures, one important thing is to communicate how the imager, like myself, who is doing the imaging of the patient, he can communicate with the interventional cardiologist or the surgeon who works the catheters. And this fusion imaging, this is another development of imaging, as you can see, where we can, the interventional cardiologist or the surgeon can see actually the images, the echo images in front of him. So this is the fluoro and this is the echo, one top of the other. And this for a transeptal approach, as you can see here, attending with a catheter tending to the septum to try to cross the septum. Again, I show you this. This is now a mitral clip procedure, right atrium, left atrium, going from the right to the left to go to the ventricle. This is how the clip looks under imaging. Again, these procedures would not have been possible without imaging, without to have the interventional cardiologist doesn't see the leaflets, doesn't see all this in front of him. He relies 100% on imaging. This is the clip coming down to the mitral valve, as you can see here. This is how the clip looks as it's open. And you can see here, try to test the grippers to make sure they're working before you go into the ventricle. This is a 3D image. This is the clip. And this is the mitral valve. And you want to make sure that the clip is perpendicular to the commissure of the mitral valve. This is the jet. You can see the jet of the MR. So you can know that you have the clip where the MR is coming, the mitral regurgitation is coming from. In this particular case, in the middle of the mitral apparatus, this is how the clip looks in the ventricle, and this is how it looks in 3D. And this I focus to you just to see how both leaflets are on the clip, on the grippers. And another image here, again, as you can see, the grippers coming down and clipping the leaflets. And again, fusion imaging, you can appreciate the clip here on fluoro and echo. And this is with color, minimal for residual mitral regurgitation. And you can put many clips. Usually, sometimes, especially for the secondary MR, we can put 2 or 3 clips. Again, the same process, deploying the one clip, going from the left again, from the right to the left to deploy the second. This is with fluoro, how the clips look. As you can see here, you cannot see, this is fluoro. You cannot see the leaflets. You see the metal from the clip, but nothing else. So these procedures, without imaging, without 3D TE, cannot be possible. And this is how the valve looks. The 2 clips that we put on this patient, who had a FLEL P2 scallop, 2 clips, and no MR at all. Actually, minimal MR, residual MR after the 2 clips are placed. And again, today, for primary MR, there is a 2A indication for transcatheter edge-to-edge repair. And we are lucky here that we have Dr. Adams with a great program for mitral valve, even the toughest cases they have for surgery. But if a patient is high risk for surgery, transcatheter edge-to-edge repair can be a possibility for this patient. And of course, it's 2A indication also for secondary mitral regurgitation on a patient who is on guided directed medical therapy, aggressive heart failure medical therapy. If he still has symptoms, we can use transcatheter mitral clip for therapy. And this is because of the results of the COAPT trial, which show that patients who are on guided medical therapy and the clip, they do much better even after 5 years follow-up compared to patients who are only on guided directed medical therapy. Also, we can do valve-in-valve transcatheter mitral valve replacement, as I show you for TAVI in TAVI, TAVI valve on a bioprosthetic valve or TAVI on TAVI. we can do on somebody who has a bioprosthetic mitral valve surgical. After the valve degenerates, we can go and put another valve without to have to open the chest, transcatheter therapy. As you can see, this is a patient, beautiful again, with 3D imaging. You can appreciate the bioprosthetic valve. You appreciate even the stitches that the surgeon has placed, suture this valve. This again, what the surgeon will see when he opens the chest. This is a more detailed image. These patients, as you can see, the leaflets are very thickened, calcified. This is a bioprosthetic valve, don't open, so this patient has severe mitral stenosis of the bioprosthesis. Again, you go from the right to the left just to make it easier. You guys see, we guide the interventional cardiologist. This is a 3D image, real life, while the interventional cardiologist tries to push from the right side to the left, and he tries to put the catheter where he will deliver the valve in the abnormal bioprosthetic valve. You can see, he can see and move the catheter and try to put this catheter on this bioprosthesis. And as you can see here, again, he tried to do that. He does it. This is the balloon. We try to balloon the valve before, just in order to make it bigger before we try to put the new valve. And this is the new valve that you can see. Deploying the new valve under, again, rapid pacing, because you have to make the heart as still as possible. And this is what you get. Stenotic bioprosthetic valve to start with, and without to have to open the chest, you put another valve on this patient, and you have, again, a wide open mitral, new mitral valve. Look at this, the leaflets on 3D, wide open compared to where we started. This is from the ventricle, this is from the atrium, the surgeon's view, and this is from below, from the ventricle, how the bioprosthesis looks. So the challenges with putting a transcatheter mitral valve replacement is the saddle shape anatomy of the mitral annulus. And you can appreciate that's how the annulus of the mitral valve looks like, a saddle shape. And that's why we have problems developing a valve that will fit in here in order to have a good result. This is a nice image, the Apollo trial. This is what we use here in Mount Sinai with Dr. Adams being the PI. And these are the two valves. These are transeptal approaches. I told you this is the best and the most promising technique is to try to do it transeptal. Otherwise, efforts to do it from the ventricle, which is easy to do, have a lot of problems because you give another insult to the ventricle. So these are the two sizes. This is, again, a case of severe mitral regurgitation on this patient. And again, important is the size. So CT, as you can see here, CT is the gold standard to measure the annulus. This is the annulus. As you can see, saddle shape with a lot of anatomical markers around that you have to deal with in order to do a perfect deployment. And that's why, since a lot of efforts have been made, we don't have yet a perfect technique for this. And just show you what is the danger. The danger is if you put a prosthetic valve, is if this valve is positioned too deep into the ventricle, is to cause an obstruction, an LVOT obstruction on this patient. So today we use a simulator with CT and try to measure this area and see and try to predict after you put this valve if you have obstruction. Because the worst you can do is to try to fix the mitral valve, but you cause like an LVOT obstruction, which can be catastrophic for the patient. So today, by using CT and simulation, where you can put the valve that you decide to put, you can measure this area with CT. And in this particular case, the area was very open, so would not have been a problem to put a transcatheter valve. This is how the valve looks after before it's deployed. Here is the deployment of the valve, again under rapid pacing. And look at this, the valve is deployed here. And this is how 3D looks. no MR at all, perfect deployment without to have to open the chest going from the transeptal. So hopefully, there are a lot of problems now, and I don't have to go through that, but hopefully these valves will get better, the techniques will get better, and in the future, hope that this will become like a TAVI and be offered to the patients. Moving to the transcatheter tricuspid valve therapies to finish. As you know, and I know you are all young here, but in the past we were saying that the forgotten ventricle, the right ventricle was forgotten. Nobody was paying attention to the right ventricle, but now we have the technology to follow and monitor the right ventricle. This is the tricuspid valve in 3D, as you can see. Again, many devices for the tricuspid valve as well that they are tried, and we continue to try. An important thing for the tricuspid valve, for the tricuspid regurgitation, if you have severe tricuspid regurgitation and you try to fix it, is if the right ventricle will be to sustain the lack of volume, because as you know, the right ventricle, the function depends on the volume. So if you take away the volume from the tricuspid regurgitation, if the RV will be able to work well, and that's very important before you decide to fix the tricuspid regurgitation. This is a patient with a FLEL tricuspid valve. This is a tricuspid valve, as you can see, no coaptation. As you can see, you don't have to be a cardiographer or trained to see torrential tricuspid regurgitation. And this is a RV strain that gives us an idea, as I told you, about the fibers, myocardial fibers of the right ventricle, to tell us if it's normal, and also some other techniques here on the right that will get an idea if the right ventricle is good enough to be able to sustain the lack of volume from the tricuspid regurgitation if it's fixed. This is an MRI, and as I told you, MRI is the gold standard for volumes for both the left ventricle and the right ventricle. As you can see, high definition imaging that you can measure the CCs, the mLs of volumes, diastolic volume, systolic volume, etc. And as you can see, the 3D for the tricuspid valve is not there yet as well as is for the mitral valve. So that's why also imaging and these techniques for the tricuspid valve are not perfected yet, but we are trying. And again, this is a part of the 3D that explain, we call it, many views. I put just one view here, just for your to see. We go across the tricuspid valve to see where the tricuspid regurgitation is, to try to tackle it. And the important thing to know, and all of you know, all the elderly patients today, they have leads. They have pacemakers, they have AICDs, many of them. So a lot of the TR in many patients today that we deal with is because of these leads. As you can see here, on this lead that impinges on one of the leaflets that is causing the significant tricuspid regurgitation. And this is a problem because what you do, sometimes you have to take out the pacemaker or the ICD in these patients and fix the tricuspid valve and go and put it back again. So it's a big questions that we're working on today. Also, 3D CT, as you can see, real life, because as you can imagine here also, you need the size of the tricuspid annulus to decide what device and what valve to use. And 3D, real life 3D here, you can appreciate exactly to give you the measurement of the tricuspid annulus. And today, as I told you, because the imaging is not good enough and the devices are not perfected yet, there is no recommendation per the current valve guidelines for transcatheter therapy of the tricuspid valve. What we do here is we do the triluminate trial, which is a tri-clip, as the Matra clip, the same technology for the right side, and I will show you again some imaging. Again, this cannot be done without imaging. This is the catheter on the right atrium that delivers the clip. That's how the clip looks, exactly as the clip that I show you for the mitral valve. On the top, as you can see, you try to put the leaflets on the clip, and here is you grasp the leaflets and you close the clip. And here are some of the techniques for the 3D multiplanar reconstruction, where you can go exactly where the leak is and see if you can put another clip or no. So these are, again, advancements of 3D echocardiography technology. And these patients do better after when you put a clip and you have reduction in the tricuspid regurgitation. And also, as I showed you before, that you can put a TAVI in TAVI or a TAVI valve on a bioprosthetic degenerated valve. I'll show you a mitral valve on a degenerated bioprosthetic mitral valve. The same here. This patient with a bioprosthetic tricuspid valve, which has stenosis and regurgitation. This is how the valve looks on 3D. Severe tricuspid regurgitation. So you can see the color goes backwards. And again, here on 3D. And again, this procedure is guided with 3D. As you can see, we tell the interventional cardiologist where he is with a catheter and where he has to move the catheter to go into the tricuspid valve. And here is the valve in the tricuspid, in the malfunctioning tricuspid bioprosthesis. And here is after the valve is deployed. So you have, again, you fix in the tricuspid valve, the surgical tricuspid valve with a new valve without to have to open the chest. And all these are because of imaging, but also, of course, because of interventional techniques and also improvement in the valve technology. The last, before I finish, is, as you can see here, we use transophageal echo, as I show you, most of the time. Today, though, there is a nice catheter, intracardiac echo, which basically you put a catheter, this is the catheter, in the right atrium, and you can obtain images through this catheter, close enough into the heart. So this is technology that is still improving, and I think this will be very useful. So today, mostly for the tricuspid valve, we use both. So like we have a case today, we have both the TE probe in and the ICE catheter in and take images depending where we are and what we want to accomplish from both. So I think these techniques, for the time being, are complementary each for another. So to conclude, I think that imaging is critical. I think I show you that imaging is critical for the structural and valve interventions. It's very important for planning, guiding, and follow-up of these patients. Many of the procedures performed today would not have been possible, as I told you, without imaging, and I think I show you that. Imaging is tremendously important for the safety of the procedures, and as imaging technologies will continue to improve, the possibilities of transcatheter structural and valve interventions will only continue to grow. And just before I finish, I want, this is a team effort. As you know, if you work with us, there's a hard team that has a lot of people, imagers, surgeons, structural interventionalists, CT, MRI, a lot of nurses. So it's a big team to make this happen. And I want to thank you for coming, for being here, and also happy holiday season to all. Thank you very much for.